former candidate to become the mayor of Lewisham was fired from her job for saying she believes marriage is between a man and a woman in a campaign leaflet. Maureen Martin, whose views on marriage hail from her Christian faith, was running to become a mayor of Lewisham in London. In April, she was fired by her employer, London and Quadrant Housing Trust, which she'd worked there for 13 years, after being targeted by a Twitter mob who accused her of hate speech. There are elements of that story which you will have heard of before. We're joined by the former Lewisham mayoral candidate, Maureen Martin, as well as the Deputy Director of the Free Speech Union, Benjamin Jones. Welcome to you both. Maureen Martin, we'll start with you. Just if you can, in summary, explain what happened to you.
Yeah, hi, thanks, Colin, for inviting me on. Yes, just a brief summary of what happened to me. As you say, I was running to be mayor of the Lewisham Council. As a member of the Christian People's Alliance, I'm the president of that party. And part of my election campaign, I had 6 points on my campaign. And one of them was that I would cut through political correctness and state that the truth that marriage between a man and a woman, natural marriage between a man and a woman, is the building blocks for a safe, prosperous society and the safest place to raise children. This obviously went out to all the registered voters in Lewisham, about 200,000 of them plus, in a mayoral candidate leaflet. And as a result, there were Twitter, I would say a Twitter mob, a Twitter attack. And this particular group put my mayoral statement on Twitter, and this generated quite a bit of blowback or hate response on Twitter. One of the people that were connected to this group happened to be a resident of L&Q. They made a complaint to L&Q. There were 3 complaints in all. 2 were from residents and 1 was from a colleague, funnily enough. This complaint generated, as far as L&Q was concerned, it was discriminatory against LGBTQ community. This, they claimed, was bringing L&Q into disrepute. Therefore, they put me through a disciplinary process, claiming that, of course, I was breaking their inclusion and diversity and social media policies.
Yeah. Maureen, I'm just going to pause you there because we've got the germ of the story, and I have to say there are elements of that story which we've sort of heard of before. I mean, your circumstances are unique to you, but that pattern of sticking to something which you believe in your heart and soul to be theologically correct, and a statement of your Christian values and an expression of that,
absolutely,
and then people complaining via Twitter. Let's turn to Benjamin Jones from the Free Speech Union. Benjamin, I thought when we got the Equalities Act, which a lot of this stuff is based on, I think 2010, the Equalities Act, there was a provision effectively making religious convictions a protected characteristic. So it's both possible to hold strong religious convictions, which, yes, some people may find objectionable, and not be discriminatory. Is that your reading?
It is, and I hope Maureen wins her case. I'm afraid the reality is, much as you say, these things, these stories, this is just the tip of the iceberg. I have conversations like this with people, I'm sorry to say, every day of the week. To give you some sense of perspective, at the Free Speech Union this week alone, we have more than 80 live cases where we are helping people in situations like Maureen's, where they've lost their job, or they've lost work, or they're facing an investigation for expressing often very mild views that are shared by a great many people, sometimes views that are a minority view, but which they should be absolutely entitled to hold. This is a huge problem. And these stories that do cut through and are reported in the press rightly get attention. But as I say, they are just the tip of the iceberg, I'm afraid.
Benjamin, it's obviously difficult to know, but, well, you're in as good a position as anybody to guess. Is Maureen likely to get her job back? I ought to start by saying, Maureen, do you want it back?
No, not at all. I think L&Q made their position quite clear, and I would not want to work for an organisation who would penalise someone for their Christian beliefs, particularly while running for local office. So no, I don't want my job back with L&Q. OK. Hypothetically,
though, Benjamin, if she did, what would be the prospects of its restoration?
Well, I don't want to give legal advice in the context of an interview. But it looks to me as a layman like a very, very strong claim. I hope Maureen wins it. But what we really need, and this is what the Free Speech Union is campaigning for, is stronger protection for employees. We're campaigning for reform to the Employment Rights Act. We'd like to see much stronger protection so that people can't be fired for expressing effectively non-woke views outside of work. And critically, we also want to see protections for people so that the offence archaeologists trawling through people's old and sometimes practically ancient Facebook posts are not able to get people sacked for things they've said years and years ago. We've seen cases of people who've been fired or investigated for things they said when they were teenagers. That's patently a ludicrous situation. So you mentioned the Equality Act, and that's an important piece of legislation for protecting people. And as I say, I hope Maureen will have a very strong claim and will win it. But we do need stronger legal protection. That's what we're campaigning for. We have a free speech manifesto that you can find on our website. And we are campaigning for the leadership candidates in the contest at the moment to make free speech the centrepiece of their pitch. We really need stronger protections. And this should be a serious political issue. And it's obviously one that people feel very strongly about. So I'd urge you to visit our website and contact the candidates and ask them to endorse our 5-point free speech manifesto.
Maureen, Benjamin, thanks both very much indeed for your time. Really appreciate it. And we ought to say Maureen's former employer, London and Quadrant Group, their response to this story. Fiona Fletcher-Smith, L&Q Group Chief Executive, said, whilst we respect that individual's freedom to hold particular religious or other beliefs is absolute, we do not tolerate it when these beliefs are manifested in a way that is derogatory or offensive to others. Several of our residents raised complaints with us after reading the leaflet. This matter was investigated in accordance with L&Q's policies and procedures and in line with the Qualities legislation and the ACAS Code of Practice and the appropriate action taken. Cathy Gingell's alongside me. Your take, Cathy.
Doesn't it make a mockery of the notions of inclusion and diversity? I mean, it's inclusion and diversity if you agree with that particular line from the employer there. No inclusion and diversity if you happen to hold certain beliefs that are long-held traditional beliefs in this country. So it's revolutionary, really. It's part
of a culture, Cathy. I recommend for your edification, if you've got 7 minutes, that's how long it takes, 7 minutes to watch Piers Morgan's interview with the evangelical preacher Graham.
Yes, I think
Franklin Graham, so the son of.
Yes.
And Billy Graham's son. We tried to get him on to do an interview, but he'd already gone back to the States. But I recommend you have a look at it because it's a brilliant example of somebody whose views many people will find objectionable, homophobic even, but they are sincerely held and coherent. I'm talking about Franklin Graham. And the impossibility of someone like Piers Morgan to understand that somebody can have this view. Watch the interview. You'll see what I mean. It's an extraordinary journalistic display of an unwillingness to listen to somebody's sincerely held religious convictions.
Absolutely, but she wasn't even demanding that, nor was she derogatory about anybody else. I mean, that is entirely fabricated. That is by their own thought processes that they're triggered and take a defensive action. I mean, in the hierarchy of victims, clearly the Christians fall right at the bottom in the hierarchy. They're the last victim to be considered, and that seems to be their only type of resort